القليل من القليل تبلوا بالقليل من القليل.
Welcome to the Friday Circle podcast, a collection of Islamic reminders and circles to recharge your iman.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for staying for the second part, which is the second in a three-part series talking about the life of Muhammad al-Fatih, and specifically one of the turning points in history, not just Islamic history but general history, which was the conquest of Constantinople that happened in 1453. So a very brief recap on last week. We spoke about a few things. We spoke about why Constantinople was so important at the time. It was the capital of the Byzantine or the Roman Empire, so the capital of the Christians. We spoke about the importance of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said to the companions, "Verily you will conquer Constantinople, and what a wonderful leader will that leader be, what a wonderful army will that army be." And this hadith would form the inspiration for many Muslims after to try and be that leader, be the man who led an army and conquered Constantinople. We mentioned one significant attempt, which was led by Muawiyah radiallahu anh, which was a 7-year siege when he was the Khalifa, when the Muslims could not penetrate the city. And it was 7 years they tried, and about 30,000 Muslims lost their life. And this was because Constantinople was built with, we spoke about the famous Theodosian walls, and we'll show a picture of those shortly. Then we spoke a bit about the Ottoman Empire and how that came into formation and its history. And we ended talking about Muhammad al-Fatih. For those who were here last week, what are some of the things we learnt about Muhammad al-Fatih when he was young? He spoke multiple languages. It was reported 5 or 6 different languages. Anything else?
Physics and mathematician.
Sorry?
He studied physics and math.
Physics, math. So he didn't just learn the Islamic sciences. So he learned Quran, Hadith, but he also learned other sciences too. Yes, bro?
His father appointed him as the emperor?
Yes, at a young age, right? So his father sort of stepped aside and made him the leader of the Ottoman Caliphate at the age of 12. And then the Christians with whom they had treaties with broke the treaties, so his father came back into power. Does anyone, a bit of a stretch, but does anyone remember the name of his 2 sheikhs when he was young? So I don't want their names to be forgotten in this story. So his main sheikh was someone called Ahmed al-Kawrani. Okay, that was his main teacher, who taught him multiple sciences. And there was another sheikh who infused in him the spirit of that hadith, who made him see, sort of inspired a young Muhammad al-Fatih about this hadith and showed him that you could be the man. This could be you. Your life could be this life. What was the name of that sheikh? Sheikh Shamsuddin. Sheikh Shamsuddin. I think it's important to know that because they played such a pivotal role in his thinking. And the concept of having scholars close to the leaders, close to the soldiers, is something we're going to see a lot today as well, and why that's so important. And Sheikh Shamsuddin didn't just sort of inspire him with this hadith, he inspired him with the spirit of jihad. This was a period of time where wars were commonplace between the 2 main religions. The Crusades had happened a couple of 100 years earlier, the Mongols had happened a century prior, less than that even. So this was the sort of spirit of the time. So now Muhammad al-Fatih is 19 years old, and his father Murad II has passed away. So he's now the leader of the Ottoman Khilafah, and by extension he's the leader of the Muslim world. It's the biggest Muslim empire on earth at the time. And so he's come in with this thinking that I am going to take Constantinople. This is a city which has stood for 1300 years. No one has penetrated this city. No one has taken this city in 1300 years. Okay? And we'll remind ourselves why that was the case. If you can see this map. So is the pointer working on the thing? No, it's not fine. So I'll just show you. So just for those who didn't know, Constantinople is modern day Istanbul. Okay? So that's the borders of the city. That's the famous walls of Theodosius on land. And it's a special city because it's got natural defenses across the other 3 sides. So it's got the Sea of Marmara on this side, the Bosphorus on this side, and this little strip here of water is called the Golden Horn. And so either you would try to attack Constantinople by sea, so you wouldn't go here because there's no natural place to set up base here, it's just the sea. So either you would try to go on land, which no one had ever done before, or you would try to enter on the Golden Horn. And the Golden Horn was arguably the weakest point of the city. So the wall along here was the least fortified. But that wasn't much of a problem because the Byzantine Empire was very strong in terms of its navy. So they had multiple ships scattered here. And they had routes from the Black Sea and from the rest of Europe for ships across the Christian world to come and support them if they were ever attacked. We spoke about this chain. So they had this huge steel chain placed across the Golden Horn. If any enemies would try to enter, the chains would be raised and ships could not cross this chain. Okay? And they would lower it obviously for their allies. So this is the natural geography of Constantinople. About these walls, does anyone remember how tall we said the tallest wall was? Yeah, so over 12 meters, which is like 3 double-decker buses high, okay? This is a picture of what the walls of Theodosius look like, okay? So there would be a huge ditch outside, and then you'd have sort of a small, middle, and large wall. Along the largest wall, there would also be towers, okay? And we'll see later as the battle progresses why this played such a pivotal role in defending the city and why this proved such a problem for Muhammad al-Fatih and the Muslims. So he's come in at the age of 19. We know that he's been raised as an exceptional person. He's not your run-of-the-mill everyday leader. He's not been spoilt. All right? He's lived a life where he's been taught key things about what life is about. You're the leader of the Muslims. He surrounds himself with scholars to make sure that his sort of moral and spiritual compass is always correct. Okay? And he's come in with this idea that the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take Constantinople. And this was something he was continuing from his forefathers. So from Suleiman Shah, who was the sort of the beginning of the Ottoman dynasty, to Ertugrul, to his son Uthman I, successive people in the Ottoman Khilafah had not just established them in the land, but they had taken more and more territory and established Islam throughout this part of the Middle East and part of Europe. So it was only natural that Muhammad al-Fatih would seek to do the same. It wasn't natural, however, that he would choose Constantinople as his target, because like I said, it had never been taken before. So how did he start to prepare? Number one, he increased the size of the army drastically. The total army ranks, by the time he had implemented his plans, were about 250,000 strong. It was one of the largest armies in the world at the time. Number two, he developed a group of specialist soldiers called janissaries. Okay, so this was part of his his character as a leader. He wouldn't treat everyone homogeneously. If you've got such a large army, you could effectively say, well, I've got commanders in charge and they'll run and they'll organize it how they want to organize it. But that's not what he did. He looked in the army and he wanted the best of the best, like Marines. I want the best of the best chosen, and they're going to have specialist training and they're going to be our special forces. And we're going to see the role that they will play later in the siege. The other thing that he did was, much like himself, he nurtured the spirit of jihad amongst his soldiers. Now you can imagine, because this is part of human nature. You're a soldier in this army, okay, and you're told, right, the new emperor is here, the new sultan is here, and his first thing for us is that we're going to take Constantinople. Now, really and truly, if you're even with the size of that army, your first thought is going to be, we're going to take the city that in 1300 years no one has ever taken. And that's the first thing. The second thing was, the Muslims didn't have much experience in terms of ships. They weren't navy experts. And to take that city, you needed to be experts in navy. You needed to have an armada of ships that could break through the Golden Horn. So he made sure that throughout the army, scholars were scattered throughout there to keep the spirit and the morale of these soldiers high, and to again infuse them with that spirit that you're doing this fi sabilillah. This is jihad in the way of Allah and the associated rewards with it. And we spoke about this, I think Azim did this when he spoke about leadership and the skills of a leader. And I think one of the key definitions we came to was that a leader is someone who can inspire people towards a vision, towards a goal. And this is exactly what Muhammad al-Fatih was able to do. The next thing that he did was, he had the road rebuilt from where the Ottomans were based. So they were based in a place called Adrianople, which in modern day is called Edirne. There used to be a road from Adrianople to Constantinople, which had broken down over the centuries. So he had this road rebuilt. Now, as soon as he does this, the Emperor Constantine, who's based in Constantinople, he obviously becomes suspicious. What is the reason why he's rebuilding the road to Constantinople? So the Christians start to sort of become on alert. The second thing Muhammad al-Fatih does, knowing that now, as soon as that road is being rebuilt, now time is of the essence, right? So the enemy doesn't have time to prepare. He has this castle fortress built. And it's called Rumali Hisar. This is a modern day picture. In English, I think it's called the Bogashken Castle or Bogaseken Castle. And this was built, it's off the map. But you see this little strip here of land? It was up around here that fortress was built. And that fortress would be the base from which they would launch their attacks, number one. And number two, it would stop any allied support coming down the Black Sea and into the Bosphorus. Okay? Now, you can see it's a proper castle fortress, okay? That's just the side view. Oh, sorry. How long do you think this took to build? This is 600 years ago. So we're talking, men carrying bricks and building and etc. How long do you think this took to build?
Yes.
Well, there's a couple of... They built this in 5 months. In 5 months, they built a castle fortress. One thing that we're going to see today, and we're going to learn is, generally, can I get a glass of water if that's okay? Sorry, man, my throat's a bit sore today. One thing we're going to see today is that, generally when we speak about Islamic history and we talk about famous battles and key moments, most of the time, Muslims are the underdogs, right? We hear this a lot. And that, they fight against the odds, they go against the odds, they beat bigger armies, people that are better equipped, more specialist training, more experience, etc. This is actually one of the few examples in history where we can say, actually, the Muslims were actually the best here. And that wasn't by fluke, it was by design. Because you've got a succession of leaders who are leading with the advice of scholars, with pure intentions, and they have a sincere intention to spread the word of Islam on earth, to establish the rule of Allah on earth, okay? And they didn't do it in a half-hearted way. They did it by looking for the best of the best in terms of how they trained their soldiers. Jazakallah khair. How they trained their soldiers and how they built their equipment. So this is not some half-baked effort here. This is, a fortress they built in 5 months. And you're going to see, as we go through the different stages of the battle, where this sort of idea that the Muslims are really, the best of the best here. They are the peak, they are the pinnacle, and everyone else is looking up to them. And we see that in many moments throughout this battle. The other thing that Muhammad al-Fatih did was, he personally would make reconnaissance missions to Constantinople. So he'd go in secret with a small band of soldiers, and he would scope out the outer borders of the city and the wall. And this is, you could argue, beneath the man who is the king of the Muslims, the leader of the Muslims. But this is how much passion he had for this mission. He made sure, I'll do this myself. And because he was somebody, as we know, of exceptional intellect, he was able to make sort of analysis of what kind of force would be needed to penetrate those walls. How are they going to break through those walls? And that led on to maybe we say the second most important decision he made during this conquest. This is a cannon in the Askari Museum in Turkey. This is what reportedly one of the cannons they used during the conquest of Constantinople. Not the main cannon, but one of. Muhammad al-Fatih knew to penetrate those thick walls, he needed a cannon, the likes of which the world had never seen before. It didn't exist, okay? And there was only one man who could build it, and he wasn't a Muslim. He looked in the Muslim ranks, and the specialist skill to make this cannon wasn't there. So he found a man who could make it. His name was Urban. He was from Hungary. He was a very famous engineer. And so he said to Urban, this is what I need. I need a cannon so big that it will break through the walls of Theodosius. Name your price. So Urban was like, fine, this is my price. He obviously gave him some extortionate fee. And Muhammad al-Fatih said, I will pay you 4 times what you're asking me. And I found this extremely interesting. Because this is an example of a man, Muhammad al-Fatih, finding a skill that he needs, right, for an objective that is lofty, and he's paying this man what he's worth, right? He didn't go cap in hand. He didn't say, we're a Muslim organization, do it half price. Oh, please, brother, Bismillah, please, we're really struggling here, please. Out of the goodness of your heart.
100% donation policy, he didn't say that.
Yeah, so, he said, look, you give me your price. Okay, it's this, it's X. I'll give you 4 times it. That's how much this means to me. So for Urban, he's like, whoa, this is crazy. This is how much they want this. So he's happy. He's going to make this cannon. And he did. And he made that cannon. And so once this cannon was made, they said it was 27 meters long. The cannon balls weighed a ton. And there's conflicting reports about how heavy it was to carry. One says it took 300 oxen. Another said 600, but who cares? Let's say 300 oxen to drag this cannon along the ground. When they tested it, this is 600 years ago, the cannon landed a mile away and it made a hole 6 foot deep. So this was unheard of at the time. As a side point, this cannon would form, Muslims would learn how this cannon was made, and then in the coming centuries they would make their own cannons based on this design. They would learn the specialist skill. And then he also had many ships built in secret because the Christians, the Byzantine Empire, would not expect the Muslims to come with lots of ships. That's not their skill set. But Muhammad al-Fatih wanted to surprise him, so he had many ships built in secret. This is a picture of what the cannon may have looked. There's lots of pictures of Constantinople 600. We don't know how it really looked, but that's just one artist depiction. Okay, 10 minutes left. So the attack started in April 1453. In total, the siege would last 53 days. Before the attack, the troops and the soldiers, they were given a last reminder from the scholars about what they were about to embark on and the importance of the mission that they were about to undertake, and the dream that they all had that they would be from this wonderful army that the Prophet ﷺ had described centuries earlier. They wrote a letter to Constantine, Muhammad al-Fatih, he wrote a letter to Constantine in the city. And he said, as you know, we have surrounded your city, okay? And you know the preparations we have made. And so we are offering you a chance now to surrender, okay? And if you surrender, I guarantee safety for all within your walls. The Byzantine, the Christian Empire at this time, it's not at its strongest. It's not. They're more divided. There's issues between the Protestants and the Orthodox Church. So Constantine knows that he's not in the strongest position. The Christian Empire is not really going to rush lots of cavalry to support him. But he also knows that no one has ever broken into this city. So he writes back and says, I would rather die than hand this city over to you. And so that was the commencement of battle. So on this map you'll see, this is the stretch of Constantinople, the Golden Horn, that's the chain, and that's the Christian ships. In the green, if you can see on the left there, these are the forces of the Muslims. On the top left, that huge cannon. This is the wall of Theodosius. And these are the Christian forces within the city. Now they were quite steady because what they could do, they knew that no one's going to attack here, no one's going to attack here, nobody can get in here. So they fortified this wall. All of their soldiers, they concentrated them along this wall. When the attack started, Muhammad al-Fatih ordered it to happen simultaneously. He said, I want the cannons firing, and I want all of our ships to come down from the Rumadi Hisar and go straight into the Golden Horn. So they started straight away. The large cannon immediately blew a hole into the wall, straight away, okay? Which was a huge shock to the soldiers' hair. But there was a big problem. Because it was so enormous, it took 3 hours to reload the cannon. And they weren't firing from close by. So in those 3 hours, all of these soldiers would get together and they would rebuild the wall as quick as they could. So there wasn't an easy path for any sort of soldiers to get through. And it carried on that way for some time, okay? And then we move on to what happened with the ships. Now, this is the Muslim armada coming towards the Golden Chain, and they really struggled. Many Muslims lost their lives from amongst these ships. They couldn't penetrate the chains, and the Christian forces were much stronger, much more experienced in naval warfare, so the Muslim ships were sort of stranded here. In addition to this, Constantine asked for help from the Christian world. Your famous city is under attack. He got a very limited response. The main response came from someone known as Captain Justinian. Justinian was an Italian captain based in Genoa, but at this time he was much closer to Constantinople. And he came with an elite guard of 700 soldiers. They came on ships, and they were able to not only break through the Muslim armada, they broke through the Muslims, and they joined the Christian ships here. Muhammad al-Fatih, it is said, had travelled between the wall and this border of land here, where he was shouting directions at the ships. The naval commander he had put in charge, he was very upset with when he learned that the Christian ships had broken through. And he said to him, in 24 hours, I want to see progress with our ships, or I'm going to remove you. The next day, what happened? More Christian ships came in and broke through. So Muhammad al-Fatih, he removed that commander. And this shows us another side of his leadership, in that he had no blind loyalty to anyone. This is all for the sake of Allah, and they're all brothers in Islam. but he's assigned someone a task of vital importance and he's not able to do that task. So he will find someone who is able. He will judge people on their merits. So he removed him and put somebody else in charge. Another thing that happened in this early part of April, early part of the battle, the cannon blew another hole in the wall. This time, a group of Janissaries got to the wall and they engaged in fighting with the Christian forces. It was about 4 hours worth of fighting. They were pushed back, the Janissaries. However, that was the first time in 1300 years that fighting had taken, 1100 years, that fighting had taken place in the boundary of Constantinople. So this immediately put fear in the hearts of the soldiers in Constantinople. This is a picture of what the ships would have looked like struggling across. And some of the chains are visible in a museum in Turkey to see. The chains that spread across the Golden Horn. Now when the Janissaries were pushed back and these ships were struggling, some close to Muhammad al-Fatih suggested that they should end the siege. They'd been fighting for a couple of weeks. And they said, look, we can't break through the wall, even with our cannon. Our ships are really struggling. Many men are dying in the Golden Horn. So let's take stock here. We've come prepared. We've done everything we know we can do, and we're not making progress. Muhammad al-Fatih refused. He knew in his mind, all we need is to get into the Golden Horn. If we can get past that chain, we will take this city. Yeah, we have the skills, we have the numbers. And so we saw in this picture here, where are the ships? Stuck here, right? 24 hours later, okay, after they had this discussion about ending the siege and he refused, he had a plan, okay? Not 24 hours later, beg your pardon. He had a plan which he put into action. And what would happen as a result? And this would be arguably one of the greatest military feats in history. What is about to happen is absolute genius. Absolute genius. And it's nothing other than inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because one morning, the Christians woke up to the sound of cannons blasting their ships. And the sound of Muslim soldiers departing from their ships and engaging them at the Golden Horn border. How had this happened? How had they got from here to here without even touching any of these ships, effectively in secret? Muhammad al-Fatih told his soldiers, I want every single tree in this area cut down and made into logs. Sit down, darling. Sit down, darling. Sit down, darling. 1 second, I'm coming. I want barrels of oil and grease brought. And they laid a path on ground made of logs, covered in grease, and they pulled their ships on land around the Golden Horn and into its border. And these are some depictions of what that might have looked like. You can see here, these ships moving along here. Okay, this is the miracle. This is the miracle, okay? Yes, brother?
Did that happen in one night?
Yeah, this is the miracle. You just killed my moment. I'm building up to it, bro. I'm like, yeah, this is it. One night, yeah? Oh, anti-climax, man. Right. You can imagine how many men it would take. They're proper ships, okay? They're heaving these ships across land. It was 3 miles of land. It's not flat land, by the way. It's hilly that the land had to take this on. They transported... How many ships in one night could you take, realistically? 31. This is the miracle. They took 70 ships in one night. 70 ships were moved in one night on land into the Golden Horn. When the Christian soldiers woke up the next morning, they saw ships moving on land. Can you imagine what that did to them? Like, oh my God, what is happening? You know, the wall is broken. You think they're going to calm down now. They can't get through the chain. And here they are. The Muslims are here now, basically, on the border, ready to fight. And this was incredible. I mean, this absolutely struck fear into the hearts of the enemy. Another thing that Muhammad al-Fatih had done, and this was also a tactic to shake the hearts of the Christian soldiers. He had tunnels dug underneath the city, okay? And the purpose of these tunnels was so that the enemy would know that, okay, we're repelling them here, but they're digging. That feeling of someone's digging underneath us, that's horrifying. Some parts, sometimes the Christians were able to find the Muslims where they had dug tunnels, and they would sort of pour boiling hot oil and grease onto them and burn them. You know, a lot of Muslims died through these tunnels as well, but some didn't. They dug tunnels very deep underneath, and this was all part of this tactic to shake the hearts of these soldiers who felt that their city was impenetrable. A few other things then started to happen. This is now towards May, so it's sort of over a month of fighting. A few other things started to happen that started to swing the momentum shift towards the Muslims. Firstly, the Emperor Constantine was very wary of the change of events, right? There's ships now in the Golden Horn. That's never happened before. They're digging underneath us. There's multiple soldiers, okay? And these men are not giving up. He had a discussion as to whether the city, they should offer terms of surrender, okay? And he had this with his military leaders. And some of them were in favor of offering military surrender. Again, Constantine, through his pride, he said, no, I will never surrender this city and I'll fight to the death to defend it. And we'll find out that actually that is what he did. He was still a man of honor in the sense that he did die trying to defend his city. On the 25th of May, so over maybe 5 weeks in now, the Christians were praying to a statue they had made of the Virgin Mary. While they're praying to this statue, it crumbles and collapses before them. So that was a huge shock. Then a thunderstorm comes and lightning strikes the Hagia Sophia. We mentioned the Hagia Sophia, the famous church they built. So both of these things happen in quick succession, a day within each other. And the Grand Priest of Constantinople, he says to Constantine that these are omens. These are signs that we're going to lose this battle and the Muslims are going to take the city. Then Muhammad al-Fatih, he then orders the men firing the cannons to up the intensity. Okay, we're approaching the end game now. Up the intensity of the cannons. They do so much that one of the cannons, it explodes, and Urban, our Hungarian engineer, he actually dies, because he was sort of there manning the cannons as well. He dies through the explosion of one of the cannons. So he didn't even get the money that he was promised. Now we're approaching the last couple of days of the siege. And as we're approaching it, Muhammad al-Fatih, he does something which is worth reflecting on for all of us. Because now the end game is in sight. No, victory is in the grasps of the Muslims. We've got a few minutes left, a couple of minutes left. And he says to his soldiers, today I want you all to rest. Okay, the men manning the cannons, they'll keep firing the cannons. I want the rest of you to rest and I want you to pray. That's all I want you to do today. And that's what they did. Where have we seen this before? When the Muslims are on the cusp of victory and they turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before victory is given to them. Right at the end. Where have we seen this before? Or even at the very beginning? Badr. What happened at Badr?
They had a calm and sweet night.
Yeah, so Allah put sukoon in the hearts of the soldiers. They slept. And what did the Prophet ﷺ do before Badr?
He prayed all night.
What was the incident? What happened? He was praying, and what happened?
Rain came.
That came, but not that's it.
One tent that wasn't where the lights were off and said, if we lose, it's because that person isn't praying or something. No?
No. That he prayed so much and he had his hands raised for so long that Abu Bakr had to sort of say, okay, it's enough. Like, that's enough dua. It's time to fight now. Allah will answer your du'as. This is the level, okay? When Salahuddin went to the Battle of Hittin, okay, this is the Crusades. This is the Muslims versus the Christians. This is the battle to reconquer Jerusalem. Okay? Before the battle started, Salahuddin spent the entire night crying in dua. And one of his commanders wrote that in the morning when I found him, the mat he was sitting on was damp with his tears. This is how much he cried for victory in that battle. Salahuddin was known to wake his soldiers up for tahajjud prayer. He said, you will be the reason we're going to lose this battle. It's not about the guns, the swords and the armor and the numbers. No. You're not praying your tahajjud salah. We're going to lose this battle. Get up and pray. So in this moment, and there's a really nice clip from a film made about the Conquest, which I think is a nice depiction of what it would have looked like for the soldiers praying. This is a film made in Turkey a few years ago called Fatih 1453. The total army strength was 250,000. Not that many came to the battle, though. I think estimates 100 to 150,000. And far fewer Christian soldiers. But that was always the case because they were fortified. So they didn't need their full army reserve. And then eventually a final letter is sent to Constantine. One more time. This is the mercy of Muhammad al-Fatih. He goes, look, you know where we are now. And victory is within our grasp. So I offer you one last time the chance to surrender. And I promise peace and safety for everyone inside the city. And Constantine and Justinian both say, absolutely not. We will die before we hand over the city. This is even though they know defeat is right on their doorstep. So the next day, it's an all-out attack. And the cannons blow a huge hole in the wall. And this time, multiple Janissaries get through and they engage in fighting with the Christian forces. One of the problems for the Christians was that once the Muslims had hit the Golden Horn, the Christians had to now separate their forces away from the wall to the Golden Horn side, which is why these walls are now a lot more vulnerable than they were before. And then, this is also from the film, Muhammad al-Fatih, this is on the cusp of victory, and he has no need to do this really. He has no need to do this, except that his heart is full of passion for this hadith and to be that man. He goes himself with an army of 30 Janissaries in the center, and he charges through the wall. He leads the assault through this wall. His strongest commander was a man called Hassan, Ulud Bali Hassan. He's quite famous in Turkish history because he did as the picture depicts, okay? In the film, it's maybe a little bit OTT, I don't know. In the film, he's like, his limbs are hanging off and he like plants this flag down. You're like, whoa. He's got like 15 arrows sticking out of him. Allahu Alam if that's what really happened, okay? But Hassan was the commander who, whilst fighting with Muhammad al-Fatih, he climbed to the top of one of the towers with an Ottoman flag and he planted it on the tower. So it was visible to everyone inside the city, or everyone on that side of the city. When that flag was propped up, whatever confidence that the remaining Christian soldiers had drained from them. And they started to, one by one, they all started to abandon their posts. And as the Muslims descended into the city, more and more Ottoman flags were planted across. Constantine and Justinian, they fought until they died, both of them, to the very death. And now, Muhammad al-Fatih enters the city on his horse with his soldiers behind him, and all of the residents of the city have taken refuge in all of the various churches. They're hiding in the churches and inside the Hagia Sophia. They're expecting a bloodbath. They're expecting a massacre. And if we look at the history prior to this, what had preceded by way of the Crusades, what the Muslims had suffered at the hands of the Mongols, you could argue this was the state of warfare at the time. You take a city and you just massacre it, just get rid of everybody. And that's what they expected. And they'd also been told that these are savages, right? The savages with their turbans are coming to take over the city. He came into the city and what did he say? He addressed all of the people of the city and he promised them all safety and their lives. He said, I'm not going to kill any of you today. Not just that. The Christians of the city, he said, you can stay here and you can continue to practice your religion. I'm not going to stop you. Practice your Christianity. And they did so in that city. There's some, one of the books that I read with this, some of the historians, Ali as-Salabi, he wrote his book about the conquest and about Muhammad al-Fatih to counter so many claims where historians who hate Islam, it's evident from their writings and who they cite as sources, they try to say that this was a massacre. The Muslims came in, they massacred everything, etc., etc. Ali as-Salabi, he goes back to so many sources as old as he can find from various Greek historians who say actually, despite the desire to paint it as these people were savages, Muhammad al-Fatih came and he gave these people a respect and a dignity that Christians had never given to the Muslims whenever they had attacked or conquered the Muslim land. And so he said to them, carry on your religion. The only thing he did do, however, was the Hagia Sophia, which was a symbol of the Christian world. He turned it into a church. He did this much. He goes, this is now the city of Islam. Sorry, it was a church. He turned it into a mosque. And then he changed the name from Constantinople to what? Istanbul. Yes, remember this, Istanbul. And then obviously it was changed later on. Okay. So that concludes the events leading up to the actual conquest of the battle. We'll end here today, and inshallah next week what I hope to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what legacy did Muhammad al-Fatih leave behind, and what was the legacy of this conquest? What happened next? Why is this so important for us to learn about? And what lessons can we learn from all of these events, inshallah? That's it, inshallah. Subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Friday Circle podcast. If you want to enjoy more, visit fridaycircle.co.uk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.